morning, everyone. Welcome to the 360-degree view of the customer panel at the Data 360 conference. I have an excellent panel of guests here today. I'm Donna Fedor. My company is the Arden Group. We're a healthcare, digital connected healthcare consultancy. And I also do advisory for a little investment bank because I've got partners all in the healthcare space. So I'm a healthcare girl. These guys are not healthcare people, but we're going to have a great conversation around the view of the customer in 360 degrees. The panelists here are Ariel, Tseitlin. He used to be at Netflix, and now he's at Scale Venture Partners. So he's helping new startup companies get successful in the space. And we have Rahul Todkar, who is head of analytics for Intuit. And we have Arijit Sengupta from CEO of BeyondCore, who is not only a technologist, he has about 10 patents in the space, but he's also like strategy side of things, of course. So we're going to let each of them give a couple minutes and sort of introduce yourselves, your background, your expertise, sort of like your view on this topic on a high level. Yeah, sorry, Ariel.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on the panel. My background is, I started out in software development, and then kind of moved into management and product management. Largely early in my career, enterprise software, so a lot of times systems, CRM, and other business applications, computer, application. And then made my way into startups. That's where my passion lies. And so, Ryan Engineering is also my own company. I started my own startup to provide organization for technology services to entrepreneurs. And then made my way, most recently in Netflix, where I was there up until last year, it's been about 3 years there, running cloud solutions team. So what that was all about was the operations for security service back. Netflix was just getting started with streaming service and scaling up, created the organization for how to run this massive service that all of us are fully deployed, generating a whole very volume of traffic to our homes, and building out a lot of the internal cloud platform components that we use internally in order to build the software. So we have a lot of deep expertise around cloud services that build highly available, scalable, resilient architectures. With and without assuming that we're not and obviously there's a lot of work with big people as well since last year I switched paths a little bit and moved into a different industry. So I'm sure something that so I got the opportunity to join a wonderful firm called Scale Venture Partners. Help them focus on IT infrastructure, investing in technology, venture partner, and Scale Venture Partners. And Scale Venture Partner invests early in revenue companies that are looking to scale. So past the seed formation stage, past the first capital in the company, follow capital, late Series A, Bs, or later that help the company scale its sales and marketing in order to levels. And we work with the world, largely we focus on enterprise software, and we work with the world into two halves. One is line business buyers, CFOs, SaaS business apps, and the other is the IT buyer. Ryan focuses on the IT buyers, so mobile infrastructure, big data platforms, security, cloud services, etc.
Great. My name is Rahul, and I lead marketing analytics, web optimization, data science for Intuit Small Business Group. So within that, especially some of the areas and products my team focuses on are Intuit accounting solutions, QuickBooks. I'm not sure if any of you have heard that QuickBooks is one of the premier software for accounting, and also some of the areas of products my team focuses on analytics standpoint, payroll and payments, services business for our overall portfolio as well. And within data in my group, I have some areas for data science, marketing, media analytics, customer analytics, which is like 360 is so near and dear to my heart. Also web analytics around experience optimization and voice of customer, and also data and message. So that's the kind of broader purview I have in the world of analytics. At Intuit, prior to Intuit, I was at eBay and PayPal both, running product analytics for paid offices, but also for eBay site analytics. And part of that with Capital One on East Coast, really the financial industry, and helping companies, or Capital One in particular, with the products through big data. Before it was a big deal, and big name for big data. Capital One was really understanding and getting into the deeper data and transactional data. So helping Capital One with those really data-driven insights at the time. So that's just my focus and background, being in the analytics world for a good chunk of years now. And part of me, I love just the part of data and the applications of data are, not only in the business world, but also in interest of fun. And I know if any of you have watched the movie Moneyball, that, this is what I originated with the data, and that's something which I love apart from usual stuff. I built predictive models for fantasy football, which I love, but can't think my spare time. So, it's all about data, and kind of your question around, or second point around, why do I care more about 360? Because I believe as an individual, as a company, as a small business, having different slices of data, or one view, one siloed view is not enough. You need to have a holistic view, and getting that holistic view is key, essential element to making the right decisions. If not, you obviously are making some suboptimal decisions.
Hi, I'm Arijit Sengupta, the CEO of BeyondCore. I'm more of a recovering geek, if you will. So I worked at Microsoft, worked at Oracle. My degrees were in computer science, economics, and dance, and then MBA afterwards. So basically, BeyondCore started out as a research. I was doing 10 years back with Professor Clay Christensen, who wrote Innovator's Dilemma. The whole concept of disruption comes from Clay. We were looking at how do we automate this process of asking questions. We didn't want how analysis can be done. And anybody that's looked at the space will actually tell you there is a massive amount of human error and human bias that goes into doing an analysis. If you ask the right question, you'll get the right answer. But what if you didn't ask the right question? Or you didn't realize that you asked the right question the wrong way? And that's what the research was on. After 9 years of research, we finally released the product, and recently took funding from Intuit and University. So it's been an interesting ride. Worked with 18 of the Fortune 100, ran analysis on 30 million patient lives across 1 million variable combinations for McKinsey. So it's been seeing this from the ground, seeing how analysis is actually being done. What does big data look like? What does small data look like? And how do you empower business users into using analysis themselves? That's what it's been all about.
Great, thank you. All right, let's talk a little bit about a 360-degree view. Like, what exactly is that, right? I picture it as I go up to the top of the hill and I see far in the distance, all around me, but is that really what it's all about here? It's not really about distance. Is it about up close and personal? So then I was thinking, well, maybe it's this bubble that surrounds each person, and it goes, as they go through their day, as they make their decisions or activities, there's this sort of 360-degree bubble around them. So anyway, that's kind of how I was looking at it. How do you guys all look at what that 360-degree view is? Ariel, I'm just starting.
Sure. So I think the view of centered around the enterprise. And so as an enterprise, you have prospects and then hopefully the customers that are interacting with you in a variety of ways throughout time. And in order for you to run your business effectively, you need to understand how a single customer travels through the life of being a prospect, being a customer, using your service, eventually exiting your service, coming back later. And so when I think about the 360-degree view of a user, it's really combining all the different interaction points that an enterprise has with users. So it starts all the way from the lead generation in the funnel, when you're not even a customer and you're tracking the website, materials, you're perhaps considering the purchase. And and then tying that in with what actually led you to the process of converting into free or paid user. So, starting from the leads, then going into the product. And I think one of the underutilized sources of insight that's out there is to what extent users interact with the product and being able to segment different types of users in the way that they interact with the product, whether it's based on frequency, whether it's based on longevity, or exposure to the product feature side. HubSpot, which is one of our core companies at scale, actually does this really well, where they're able to predict with a very high likelihood your probability to convert based on how many different types of features you use during your trial. And so, starting with the leads, then with usage of the product, then tying in all the different aspects of how your enterprise interacts with your customers. So customer service is a really important channel. It's also often missed because if you have somebody who's filing customer service requests, that might not be the best time to try to upsell them on a new version or an upgrade, or somebody's credit card got declined, and maybe you want to try to tie that with how much activity they actually had on the site in the last 30 days to decide how much time you want to spend on trying to retain that customer. So customer service is really key component of that 360-degree view. And then, lastly, when people quit the service, it's really important to understand how that customer journey led to that, and what it was that was predictive about them retaining or not retaining, so we can continuously work on making your service more secure.
My take on 360, I started a different way. It's just kind of telling a story. I mean, I'm not sure if you've heard this. This is something which I actually pitched to my CMO and senior executives. If you think of 360, the way I kind of think about it is in a film, this will get heard a while back. There's a group of people and they were blindfolded and they were asked to go touch an elephant and say, what kind of animal is that? So they couldn't see obviously, and they were asked, can you guess what this animal is, especially by touching parts of the elephant? And they went and touched somebody just touched the trunk, and another person touched the leg, and somebody touched the tail. Based on where they touched this elephant, they came back and said, oh, it's a rhino, it's a snake, it's this, it's a tree, it's like whatever. And they all had different views and understanding of elephant. But in reality, when they were just, the flags were removed, they all saw it was an elephant. So kind of it's like that, the 360 view, which I think everybody, if you don't have that visibility, you just kind of like blindfolded or semi-blindfolded, if you will, and you just look at one slice of data, and that's not the comprehensive picture. And that's true for an individual, a small business, an enterprise, whatever instance or example you take, that still is applicable. Now, what it means for me in my role is, especially for me, marketing, sales, and product role for me collides together and comes together. So in this role, having a 360 view means kind of like you touched on around how a customer, how a prospect progresses through the journey, right from awareness and consideration to purchase to repeat buyer, retention, and loyalty across the whole set. How does somebody, a person, progress? Are we capturing that whole set of information? And that obviously means it's touching across marketing and sales and care, all the aspects, all the functions within the company. And do we have collectively data on that person or an enterprise or a small business across like first-party customer data, second-party and third-party data? So it's all together in combination is what defines to be a 360 view. So it's not like a bubble, if you will. It's a bubble on an individual, on a company, or an enterprise. That bubble has to be completely comprehensive about that particular entity.
So I'm supposed to disagree with whatever Rahul said, but I'm probably going to have to agree with him a little bit. But to the elephant story, basically what I find intriguing is when you look at combinations of variables, right? A mistake a lot of people make is they say, if I collect information from lots of places, I have 360 degree view. What is far more interesting is what information you provide. So let me tell you a real world story. This is a Fortune 100 firm that was trying to understand the customer lifetime value of their customers. Anybody in marketing does this, they want to figure out who are the customers they should really target and how much money should they pay to acquire that customer. Sounds reasonable, right? So they did this analysis and they found that young people, and I might get the numbers a little bit wrong, but they're in the ballpark, okay? Young people were 1.2 times more valuable than their average customer. People from Florida were 5 times more valuable than the average customer. And people from New York were 1.3 times more valuable. Would everybody in the room agree that given this, I should do a Facebook campaign in Florida? Right? Who disagrees? Okay, why do you disagree?
Demographics in Florida are young.
Exactly. So one person in the room picked it up. The funny thing is what happened is they had run the campaign. They had a disastrous result. The CFO went and pulled budget from the CMO. You don't know how to run a good ROI campaign. So we get in there and we look at, the problem is it's not easy to do what we just said, right? Because if I want to look at all these variable combinations, there were 8,000 variable combinations possible. Imagine somebody looking through 8,000 graphs. But when we did run the combinations automatically, it turned out young people from Florida were completely unprofitable, to your point. And in fact, when they said Florida was 5 times more profitable, they should have said old people from Florida are very profitable. Young people from New York were 7.5 times more profitable, right? Now just remember this though, it seems so easy. I should look at variable combinations, it's obvious. You know what the problem is? If I have 250 variables, in healthcare that's very common, in marketing 250 variables is not unthinkable given what's happening today. You know how many combinations is 4 variables at a time for 250 variables? Somebody take a guess.
You think that oil or people who think that oil?
It's actually combinations, but yeah. What does that come out to? It's 4 billion. What people need to understand is our human mind doesn't understand exponential growth very well. So it seems so simple. Oh, I have 250 variables. I want to look at it 4 variables at a time. That's got to be easy, right? It's 4 billion variable combinations. You can go take every data scientist on earth, make them 100 times more effective, take every kid in India and China and make them a data scientist. You're not going to solve that problem. Is that fair? So we gotta think differently about these things.
So do you think that it's more valuable to have less data? Like this morning we talked about the data lake, right? All this data in the data lake, I think you called it a data landfill, which I actually love. And is it more valuable to have this data lake or data landfill, or is it 360-degree view, or is it more valuable to have a smaller view with better analytics, automated analytics? Like what's the balance?
That's a false choice.
Okay, it's a false choice.
It's a false choice because this is where technologists are key. You can't think of this as an either or. More data is always better. More variable combinations is always better. What you need to do is you take an exponential solution and apply it to an exponential problem. Let's take Google for example. Yahoo was categorizing the web into web links, right? Doing it through humans. When the internet started growing, it became impossible to do that. The answer was not make the internet grow smaller. The answer was, let's take a completely different algorithmic approach where I take a snapshot of the internet, figure out automatically what links matter, give you a list of 10 links of which 8 are good, and leave the human to look at the list of 10 links and figure out the last 10. Because you cannot figure out the last mile without a human. But you can change the nature of the problem. This is a technological problem. It's a false choice to say too much data or better algorithms.
How about you guys? What do you guys think?
This is very interesting. I have to agree with Arijit as well now on this one, which is rare. So I would agree with that. Having smaller restricted data, again, going back to the open example, is not going to solve. You just still are going to look at or forcibly look into a smaller set of information, which might not be the right thing. And exactly this is where, in fact, technology can help right now. With big data, there's advances in computing, in also the quantitative field where you can review the technology, understand, and mine that data to your advantage. I mean, you can touch on another example, but this is what we are trying to do in the marketing world, and the whole industry is trying to get at that. So some of you who are in the marketing world are familiar with the recent work or I guess developments in the field of media buying. Would know this example that I'm going to suggest right now is really how you can buy media and keywords on Google at scale, at millions of keywords, buying at a real-time basis. So there's something called programmatic buying and real-time bidding, and that's a new area which is unlocked with a lot of data across the whole different sources, but also with more data, you can do really effective marketing. And that's just a marketing example, but I can absolutely would argue that this is applicable across industry. Healthcare, another example, with a lot of data from patients and also the insurance providers, there's just a ton of data available. If you can let the data work for you with smarter technologies, there's just possibilities and richness of insights for your customers, for your shareholders, are really immense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a very contrarian view to take here because I think all the things that are being said are the right ones. So I mean, first I think more data is always better than less data. So I don't think you ever want to sacrifice your ability to collect data just because you haven't figured out how to process it yet. I think where the step function is being able to take these massive amounts of data and actually make sense out of it. And that's why we're seeing such a huge demand for data scientists and such a short supply of them, where it really takes somebody who understands data and understands data analysis in order to be able to understand, to know how to navigate that sea of data and how to avoid those types of mistakes in the example that was just brought up. So that's the most human-intensive way of solving that problem. And what we're seeing now is huge investment into companies that are trying to automate that and to try to come up with solutions that take those best practices of what the data scientists know how to do and make it available to organizations who can either find those resources or who can't afford to invest in them. And as from an investor's hat on, I think it's really interesting and exciting to see all of these different companies being able to democratize the ability to analyze data. Some of them are doing it well, others are doing it a little more dangerously. But I think having that data scientist automated through algorithms and through intelligent software is where we'll see a lot of the advancement happen. And there's a layout for you right there to describe it here.
If you want to see what we are doing, come better.
So let's go back to what you talked about earlier on segmentation. I mean, I think people in general don't want to be put into a box. They don't want to think that they can be categorized, that people don't think that they're really alike, but are we really more alike than we think? How easy is it to group us, and how should we be thinking, how should companies be thinking about segmenting and grouping customers so it's not offensive to them?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's unique, just like everyone else. I think we're much less unique than we think we are, and I can go back to kind of the days of Netflix of how we were able to cluster users' movie watching behavior into different buckets that tended to predict fairly well what would be interesting and what the user would enjoy watching based on things that they've seen before and things that they have watched. And so, there's a lot of clustering algorithms out there that allow you to create essentially cohorts of different users that are similar to one another. So as much as we'd like to think that we're all unique and different, I think there's a lot of value to be extracted from creating features that describe different groups and then changing the product or the service in order to tailor it to those features.
To me, segmentation is an interesting concept. I mean, it's been there for ages. I mean, for tens of years or decades even. But it has to evolve. What I think is really what it comes down to is how much data you can process to come up with a segment or a particular individual level attributes, and then also how you can act on it. I mean, what are you decisioning, what are you doing with the data, and that particular segment of information. So if you can control input and output, or have better grasp on that, then segmentation really, to me, the boundaries of segments at a meta level start to disappear. And I speak from a little experience where in Capital One days, where we were really looking, Capital One still, I believe, is the number one direct mailer in the country. I'm sure a lot of people, folks in the audience also get emails or even physical direct mail from Capital One. Many a day as well. Like some of the instances I've heard, and customers saying, hey, we got like 15 direct mail copies a day. So what's up with that? And I've heard that, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But from those days and those times at Capital One, even Capital One evolved to really a individualized message and really outreach mechanism. So segmentation was really at a meta level to an individual level, and it has evolved that and going back and forth. But really, then what to me is really segment is important, but it's then still about what you can do with the data. Can you process it? Can you understand it? And can you do something with that? Because if you can't do and really act on that individual data, you don't want to do individual segmentation. If the outcome or what you can do is really at a meta level, then that's what the segmentation you have to really stick with. Because more and more, with the more data, with more, it's really big data and all the media and third-party data, there's a demand, kind of expectation from all of us, every one of us, around personalization. Netflix is a classic example. You go to Facebook, you go to any site, you kind of expect now, hey, is this experience tailored to me as a person, rather than a broader segment? And in order to really take advantage of that and without being creepy, you need to understand and define what you're going to do when you get the data and how you're going to process it. So to me, it really boils down to those two elements on segmentation. The boundary of artificial, like this meta segmentation or a micro segmentation or an individual slicing and dicing is really up to defined based on your parameters that you can control.
So do you think, okay, go ahead.
Actually, one of the most interesting things for me for big data is the microsegmentation part of it. And why is it now that we can do microsegmentation better with big data? Firstly, if you don't have large volumes of data, you cannot get very specific. It's kind of useless to do microsegmentation because you have two observations when you get to a microsegment, right? That's useless. The second part is you need a lot of computational power to be able to statistically adjust for biases, for patterns, when you do microsegmentation. Otherwise, you don't know what you're actually looking at, right? And the cloud computing has brought the compute power, big data analytics has brought the data. But why does this matter? Let me give you a very specific example. We looked at 1 million variable combinations for that McKinsey study I mentioned, where we looked at 30 million patients in the US. Why was this important? Do you want to guess whether old men or young women are better at taking medication? How many people think old men are better at taking the medication? Typically, young women are better at taking the medication, okay? But for diabetic ketoacidosis, it's a specific disease. Young women were doing a horrible job taking their insulin to the extent that they had a 49% rehospitalization. Much higher than any other group. Now, anybody wants to guess why young women, and actually she guessed it, I was horrified she guessed it, it was the first person who guessed it ever. Anybody wants to guess why young women would be bad at taking their insulin?
What's that?
Well, everybody likes sweet stuff. Please.
It helps keep them thin.
It helps keep them thin. Exactly. If you don't take insulin, you don't process sugar, your body weight goes down. It's a way to lose 30 pounds. Now, when you find this segment, I was actually telling the doctors, put up a picture of an amputated foot on your wall. When a young person comes in, a young woman comes in, and you say, you have a 50% probability, 49%, of coming back for a surgery. You want to lose 30 pounds and risk that, or you want to exercise, right? But the point is, when you can get that specific, you can actually save lives. A pattern like that is actionable. A pattern which says diabetes is bad is not actionable. This is why microsegmentation is key. Generic patterns do not have impact. Specific patterns where you can look someone in the eye and say, people just like you are going to have a 49% rehospitalization. Believe you me, that's how we are going to fix healthcare. That's how we're going to fix many of the problems in our lives is get specific, do it from the ground up.
So people have a fear. I mean, privacy is a huge fear. How much data are they collecting on me? What are they collecting on me? I mean, it's different for retail consumers, customers versus patients versus business, right? So, people just don't want to feel manipulated. They want access. They want to see their data. They want to own their data. They want access to data. They want to know if I'm going to share my Facebook contacts. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to send them all out advertisements? You don't want to be the one to cause that. So what do you think is the tipping point? And how do you know you've gone too far? And how do you earn that trust? How do you make it, put it into your business model so that there's trust from the beginning, so there's not these questions in their mind as to what you're going to do with their data? Arjit, why don't you go?
So, for me, the worst thing about privacy is people who think it's a legal issue. Privacy is not a legal issue. It's not about putting, here's what my lawyer said as a disclaimer that I need to put on my website, and now I'm done. It's an ethical issue. It is a fundamental basis for the growth of big data. Because if we don't fix this, and we don't fix this as organizations, as technologists, as part of our core platforms, we are never going to have the impact we could have. I'm actually on the cybersecurity advisory group for the government of India, and we had a very interesting discussion around this about do people own their data? And one of the fundamental concerns we had was when you say people own their data, you are actually saying we're okay with people dying because we can't do research on that data to find the kind of pattern that's wrong, right? At the same time, you cannot tell people, I'm going to put on the internet what disease you have. That's just not acceptable. Again, though, this is a false choice, and this is what frustrates me about the discussion in the world today. The word of big data is so badly understood that there are a lot of false choices that come. Harvard Data Privacy Lab has this concept called K-anonymity. The whole idea of K-anonymity is, don't tell me anything about a group of people smaller than the number K. So if you have 25 anonymity, don't tell me anything about a group of people smaller than 25. Now, what's the interesting thing about statistics? What's the minimum sample size? You sounded like a data scientist out here. What number do I need for it to be statistically significant? 30 or 35, depending on who you talk to. So if I set K-anonymity to 30 or 35, whoever you listen to, or a higher number, right? I'm still getting all the statistical insights, right? But I'm not violating anyone's privacy because I can't get specific. I cannot look up what Rahul is doing. This is not an either or. Privacy has to be built into the bedrock of the technology. It's not a licensing issue.
Just to add on that, I think, especially with the privacy and how we are looking at data collection, the onus, the bigger part of the onus, I feel, has to be on the data providers, data collectors. I mean, this could be a company which is like, let's say for Intuit, we are collecting data on behalf of our customers, our small businesses. The onus has to be on Intuit as a company or other data providers. There are a lot of third-party data providers and the companies and technologies around this that build businesses around data and data collection. And this is the key, especially with privacy, where the companies who are collecting the data have to be accountable for making sure the data is secure, and also with that, they're providing the best experience for their customers. And this is where I think, when we know if like a company has gone too far, especially with the customer experience and the feedback cycle that you have with the customers, it doesn't take too long to understand if you've gone too far. I'm sure everybody here has seen or heard the example of Target and how far Target went to really making sure they use the data and also started sending some of the emails and communication to a teen who didn't tell the parents that she was pregnant. And all of a sudden the teen and her household start getting coupons and offers for obviously new moms. And her dad didn't know this story. And obviously the teen didn't mention that. And he complained to Target, why are you emailing or sending me all this stuff? So guess what? Target had figured out, based on the shopping pattern, that she might be pregnant, and then she's looking at the pregnancy test. So 3 months down the line, or whatever, 6 months down the line, that's this kind of a promotional material that she might find helpful. So this is where it's not doesn't make too hard from a customer lens to understand have you gone too far. If you really as a company imagine yourself in the customer's shoes and see and feel how they would react, then you would know the answer. Again, what I would argue, and I'm really argues that especially companies today don't take that much effort really around understanding the ethical and the really customer experience boundaries. And this is true for any industry, and that's where, as an industry, everybody needs to think and look hard at what they're doing with the data and how far they're pushing on.
Yeah, to add on, I think that, well, first of all, privacy is such an important aspect of the whole big data phenomenon, because now we have the ability to know so much more about individuals and understand individuals at such a deeper level that I think this kind of discourse is very important as an industry for us to have, so that we set the right expectations from both as users and as companies that use the data. When I think about privacy, I think that it's a social contract, right? In the same way that individuals share information with one another and have the expectation that that information is or isn't going to get shared based on the type of information that's shared. The same kind of social contract exists with companies collecting data about individuals. And I don't think that we can come up with a hard and fast rule that says this is unacceptable or this is acceptable from a privacy standpoint. What we can collect, what we can't share, and vice versa. So it's almost like porn, right? You can't define it, when you see it. What's important is to understand that data, privacy and data should be viewed in the context of what value individuals get from sharing that data, right? So in the example of the medical research, there's enormous societal value to sharing your anonymized data, and so most people would be comfortable with that because they will contribute something to the rest, the common good. If I'm walking down the street and the merchant that I just walked past knows my GPS coordinates and knows what I just bought last week and now starts spamming me with advertising, I might view that as an intrusion in my privacy because I don't see that I'm getting a ton of value from that, whereas what I'm giving up is a lot. So I really think of data as a currency that we're going to be able to exchange for some kind of value that we get from the people who collect that data. And when the value that we extract is greater than the perceived loss of that privacy, then we're willing to and we're comfortable with that exchange. And when it's not, then that's when you get the crying foul about data being shared in an appropriate way. Right? And we've all seen, I think it was on Facebook when they first started doing their ad network with some guy that bought an engagement ring, and then it was shown to his soon-to-be fiancée that as an advertisement or something that he had bought. So I think we know when we've crossed the line of inappropriate sharing and inappropriate uses of private data, and just being able to understand and listen to our users is one of the best ways to work in them when we cross that threshold. And I think what's also going to become more and more relevant is the transparency with which data gets collected. So as long as users understand what data is collected about them and to what uses it's going to be put, then you can have that dialogue about whether this is something that they want or this is something that they don't want, and you can listen to your users. When you get these big PR scandals, it's often when users didn't know that certain data was being collected about them and it is discovered, and then all of a sudden you start realizing that it was inappropriate, that data was being collected and was used in ways that we couldn't be comfortable with. So that transparency of how that data is collected and how whether people know that that data is being collected about them is really important. And one kind of anecdotal point on that, I was at a breakfast with the newly appointed Deputy Undersecretary for the Department of Homeland Services, and her stated mission is to be extremely transparent about all the data collection requests that they make, as well as all the data that they actually collect about users, kind of positioned against some other government agency that not to do that as ultimately for possible reasons. But I think it highlights how important that transparency aspect is in the discourse around privacy.
Is it easier to be transparent up front and then kind of see where the chips fall? Or is it easier to have the data provide some kind of wonderful outcome or aha moment or whatever, and then kind of say, well, here's what's easier? Does that make sense?
You want to ask for permission for forgiveness?
Yeah, exactly. And do you have examples of what's worked well?
And I can jump in. My view on this is rather upfront disclosure, and I'm of the opinion, no matter how delightful the experience is, and obviously how big that delightful experience, it's always is a good idea to start declaring upfront, hey, this is the data me or this company are collecting on you as an individual or a customer. And the reason I say that, because even though there's a great experience that you are creating without explicitly asking permission, there's always a lingering doubt in a person's mind or a company, whoever's mind. Like, hey, how do you get to that? And the cost of that versus the benefits you're creating, that trade-off is not favorable. Rather, you could say, hey, this is the data we're collecting, as opposed to accept. Now, what you do with that and how you create experiences is, TBD, but at least right now we're collecting the data. When you start with that permission and that kind of a contract up front of data exchange, then it becomes much easier down the line. Because we've seen all the experiences, even like Facebook is a classic example, but I'm getting this, I like it, but how did Facebook get this data? And if you got this data, what else do you have now? And that question is never ending. So rather I would start with the up front.
I would like to answer because it's again a false choice, right? Because as I was saying, you can have perfect privacy while having very close to perfect customization. It's a false choice. The reason it's a false choice is it's easier to build products slapdash without thinking through architecture from the ground up. So you see a lot of people who started doing things manually where it didn't matter, the big data world hadn't happened. Now they're trying to shoehorn their technology into the big data world, and you end up with these ridiculous situations. If you take the time to think through your architecture from the ground up, like for example, one of the rules I told my guys is, imagine we turned all security off our server. The server should still be perfectly compliant with all US and EU privacy regulation. I'm not saying I'm saying if every hacker on earth got into the server, you would still comply with all US and EU privacy regulation. Seems like ridiculous. It actually is very easy to do technology. Because you gotta think about what you store. You cannot store information about individuals. You can store insights about groups of individuals, which you can then use as Lego blocks to do the kind of customization we're talking about. But this is a false choice, and this is the most important thing. All of you should be demanding of the technological leaders in the world that they have to think beyond these false choices. It's not either or. Give us privacy and give us customization.
Well, so I'll disagree with that a little bit because we need to have some disagreements. I think there is, it is, two different dimensions that you kind of choose between. One is, when I think about privacy, I think about how much personalized data is collected and stored about you, even if it's for the use of the collector themselves. So from that perspective, there is the choice of, how much do you collect and how much do you share that you're collecting versus, how much value you should be using. And the way I would look at that question is, I think it's analogous to the question of price. Right? You share how much your product is going to cost before the user buys it or after the user buys it. Or after, I should say, not buys it, but tries it and uses it. And most of the time what we want to do is be upfront about the price. Because then price is an important consideration of the purchasing decision of using that service. But sometimes you have a situation where a product is so hard to understand and it's so new and so novel that a user wouldn't be able to kind of conceive of all the value that it will be able to bring to them. And in that case, maybe you do want to hide the price until a little bit later so that they can use it, see it, and then decide whether that's something that's valuable to them. I think the important mechanism there, whichever direction you end up making a decision, is that you give the user full control. So if you do end up collecting information about them, and you don't let them know you're collecting it, then at some point in that process, you need to say, here's the value. Do you want to continue using the product? Here's the information to collect about you, and oh, by the way, you don't want to use it. Here's what you're collecting your base and history. I think that's kind of the ethical trade-off.
Actually, I might add a slight different angle to this. I think it's not in either or. It's just really it's and like you can have great privacy, have great personalization or customization. But at the same time, if you look at today's technologies, we're not really there yet. So this is a question of short term versus long term. Long term, let's say we have great products and technologies to capture data without being with all the compliance, the EU or US compliance, and really sticking to great standards and giving the choice to the end user. That's great, but that's not where we are right now. So right now is where we need to offer upfront as much information as possible with the understanding that, hey, we collect this information to do something in the long run. So it's really a timing question more than it's a choice between these two.
So here's the problem. Rahul, I'm sorry to say this, but you have Stockholm Syndrome. And almost all of us have Stockholm Syndrome. We have been convinced that the world can't be better. It's going to take a long time. I was at the Gartner conference over the last couple of days. And there were like at least 15 times I wanted to jump up and shout, no, what you're talking about will happen in 2025 already exists right now. It's just that the biggest guys in the room don't know how to do it, and they don't want to talk about it. So the analysts have been told by them 1,000,000 times with a megaphone, we can't do this, it's too hard, it's impossible. We do it all the time. And this is why disruption happens from small groups of people. Because the big guys, it's easier for them to say it's hard, it's going to happen in 2025. People like us who are crazy, who are in teams of 20, 30 people, we don't have time to live till 2035. In a startup world, 3 months is an eternity. What are you talking about? We can do it now. Now, the only way this is going to happen is when people like Rahul get out of the Stockholm Syndrome and start going to the big guys and say, I'm a big customer of yours. You 3-character company, you another 3-character company, you 6-character company, 7-character company, better deliver this, otherwise I'm taking my money elsewhere. That focuses the mind very fast. And if they don't do it, take your money elsewhere.
So in defense of Rahul, I think it's a very different level of scrutiny that the small guys get versus the Intuits and the Targets and the others. So there is likely some of what you described, but there's also good reason for that because your CIO, CISO is not going to get fired because they're a couple of thousand users had some privacy in the way that they didn't like it. But if Intuit all of a sudden put your tax records online, then very likely the person responsible for that is not going to have a job following you.
There's a name for that. It's called fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's called FUD. Microsoft used to do it beautifully. These are objective facts. Either a server complies with HIPAA or it doesn't. You can go test it out. Either something is scalable. Like one of the challenges people, they say, oh, big data. You know what the average time to implementing a BI project is in the world today? It's 18 months. We go in and say, you want to compare products? Make them bring up a server, have your users analyze data, and do it in 5 minutes. Everybody says, you guys are insane. What do you mean you're going to do it in 5 minutes? Well, you do it. Sears as an example, where we did it in 5 minutes. McKinsey was 2 hours, and that was 30 million patient tags. What is possible has changed. It is easier for the big guys to say, by the way, my CISO is the former CISO at Sengupta Children's Hospital. And the reason we got somebody that senior is because privacy is important, right? These are objective facts, they're not subjective things. The big guys want you to think they're subjective because that's how you win fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Nobody gets fired for buying IBM. Well, they should be.
Yeah, I think there's the compliance angle, which I think is easy to do. But then there's the more intangibles, which is how much data do you collect, how long that data is stored, and those are all part of the privacy debate. And so you, again, I'll go back to what I said earlier, which is as a small company, you collecting an incredible amount of information is not going to be as detrimental to your business because it's just not as visible. It won't land on the Wall Street Journal versus if Target gets hacked and all of that, and it gets discovered that they've been tracking all your purchase history, and all of a sudden that is now available online to others because the hackers decided to expose that. I think that's a much bigger existential threat to that business. So I think you're minimizing it a little bit too much because there is real higher risk to that business because of the user base and the potential magnitude of that data being lost. And so they have to treat it with a higher level of scrutiny.
And exactly, totally. And I would say that, and it's kind of back to a bit common. There's an aspirational state, and I think nobody is denying an aspirational state, which is, yeah, sure. And this is how you get big guys to play with the same rules that you have with small guys. And especially for big guys, what are the downside of it? What's the accountability that a Target is example, or the cost or the downside is much higher right now, or none at all. I mean, Yahoo was hacked into just recently in the month of January. And what is the outcome of that? What are we trying? What is the penalties on that? Even with today being the highest, there's compliance regulations in the market. Are we there yet today? Probably not. It's a good question to ask, but it's just really, that's again kind of going back. Time point is, sure, we want to get there. Everyone wants to get there, have higher security, higher compliance, practically get go from the technology standpoint itself. But we're not there yet. I mean, this is the part of evolution, which obviously requires mindset thinking, but also requires bigger guys to adopt and actually enforce the standards. And that's where we are today. And in lieu of that, this is where we have to treat that a bit, where we certainly want to have aspired higher standards, but if we don't have it, then obviously that's where disclosures and more upfront information can certainly go along with.
Thank you. That's a good way to end it. And I'd like to open it up to questions. We only have a couple minutes, but if anyone wants to ask a question, come up to the microphone right up here in the front. And we have like maybe 5 minutes. I don't know, maybe 3. Yeah, 3 minutes. And introduce yourself. And just tell us where you're from and then ask your question.
Yeah, I'm Luke. We come from inside HPC, and I just like to have an insight when you were talking about the big lake, and more data is always better. When you're training something, you may want to work with a subset. So when you're setting up a neural network to understand the data, work with a subset, do your training on that, and the big data becomes useful. So I just want to throw that out there as an insight.
These techniques have evolved. So, for example, I want to study AI from Mills Turin Award, US Armed Forces, Chief Science, and all that. And he used to say, you never know what a neural net is actually learning. Okay? So, you can take it as learn something, but it's actually learn something else. What we're trying to do in the world of big data is trying to get into deterministic processes as much. If you have really large volumes of data, you can train algorithms on all of it and have deterministic algorithms that can still get you what you want to get to, right? So approaches are changing a little bit, and maybe if you take it offline, I'll show you some really cool stuff like that.
Anyone else? All right, great. Well, the panelists are going to be here, hopefully for...
I do want to add one thing.
Go ahead.
If you guys don't mind, because you guys are thinking about big data. Here is the one thing I want you to please. Anybody who tells you that the big data revolution has happened, point out to them that the internet revolution didn't happen with the modem. It happened with Netscape. The computer revolution didn't happen with EDVAC and ENIAC. It happened with Apple. It's when vast sections of society can directly use and benefit from a technology that we have a revolution. So if we are going to have a big data revolution, we have to find ways to have every business user be able to use it. It's not going to be the people who have the statistics and computer science background. It's going to be every business user who suddenly says, I'm going to do analysis today. And not as a separate thing from my job. It's just part of what I do as a business person. That's when we have the revolution.
Rahul, do you want to add final comment?
So 360 views. The topic here is what I want everyone to leave with is understanding 360 view is hard. I just want to say if we kind of make it sound simple or simpler, but it's just not. But at the same time, this is where the benefits of understanding and creating a 360-degree view are far more outweigh the cost, potentially the time it takes to create that view. So for whoever here, who thinking of creating this 360 view of how to get the best information, there is technology available, there is different analytics techniques available, and the benefits of having that view together, probably combined with processing of data, are just far too valuable. So don't ignore this hard. It's not a hard one to solve. It is doable.
Yeah, I actually couldn't agree more with that first comment. I think we're at the stage now of just starting to get the building blocks together for being able to make big data and analysis available to the masses. And I think it's a really exciting time because there are companies like yours and many other companies out there that are trying to make those tools and those capabilities available to the broader ecosystem, everybody within the enterprise. And I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be seeing this technology mature and to see how in all of our day-to-day lives, whether it's with the companies we work for and all of the algorithms that are going to start running in the background that make our jobs easier, or as consumers and give us the ability to curate and access the data in ways that we just haven't been able to do in the past. I'm just very excited about that.
Well, please join me in thanking the panelists. They're doing a fabulous job.